And I'll tell you, a third thing that really helps clients a lot is the fact that they always say, well, I'm stuck. I have one browser window, and I have to keep going back to open up reports over and over again. But if you use QBO in Chrome and you go up to your tabs key, you can duplicate those tabs all the way across and have multiple windows open at the same time. So that defies the odds of, I only have one browser and I hate using the back button.
Welcome to the AI in Accounting podcast. Now, here's your host, Joshua Feinberg of Vic.ai.
So I am here with Deborah from BDO USA. Thanks so much for joining me today, Deborah.
Yeah, nice to be here. Thanks for having me.
Oh, you're very welcome. As Dr. QuickBooks, I definitely wanted to make sure that we got your insight on talking about all things having to do with QuickBooks Online.
Absolutely.
So where I usually like to start with these interviews is to get a feel for what your role is within your team, how your team fits in with your overall organization, your journey career-wise that led you here. And then I'm super curious too about how you arrived at your Twitter handle persona nickname.
Yeah, so let's start from the beginning. So I think this will really give you a great deal of information for the background. So I actually was a pre-med major in college and decided to get married young and start a family young. And so I finished my degree in business and with a concentration in accounting instead of going to medical school. And so I was working for my ex-husband's family, Thoroughbred Racehorse Farm, and I was charged with managing all the genealogy for the racehorses. So all the pedigree matching, I assisted his dad with that. We did breeding. I delivered about probably over a 10-year period, 300 foals, thoroughbred racehorses. So that's the medical background. Always wanted to be a doctor, so I figured pseudo Dr. QuickBooks, so AKA at Deborah, AKA Dr. QuickBooks. Never got to deliver a baby. I did drive rescue squad for a living for 3 years before I stepped back into the professional world and selecting to move into public accounting. So I did contemplate going back to medical school after I got divorced and drove rescue squad for 3 years. So that kind of led me down the path. So, rewind, 28 years ago, I got remarried. My husband, driving rescue squad, really didn't appreciate me working inner city Cleveland. And so he said, can't you just use your college degree? So I actually started a small business on my own, and I took care of about 20 very affluent families. And the one family, she was amazing. She was just a big encouragement. And she said to me one day, she goes, Deborah, I'm tired of tracking all this stuff on these green general ledger pads. She goes, I picked up this thing at Office Max called QuickBooks. Do you think you could figure out how to use it? Because I'd really like to get stuff, really organized for the accountant. I said, sure, I'll take it home. I installed it on my computer, and I taught myself QuickBooks. So that was back in I think it was B6 of QuickBooks, so that would have been in 1995 or 1996. And I would think I wanted to be 10 years old, but I wasn't, right? I'm just stayed permanently 29 because that dates me. Yeah, so that's where it really all started. I needed a way to track people's finances, and I implemented it for our home, for our family. Budgeting. When my kids went off to college, they all had instances of QuickBooks. They had to send me their monthly bank reconciliation to get their college allowance on a monthly basis. So it became part of, my DNA. And after taking care of the families, I stepped back into corporate. My kids were really independent. I took a position as a controller. The accounting firm at the time approached me. They needed an in-house QuickBooks expert, and hence I ended up in public accounting. So that's the long and short of it.
Rescue squad, horse racing, thoughts of medical school, helping your kids budget with QuickBooks. Interesting, almost like a screenplay in the works there.
I swear I could make a soap opera, but we joke about it because jack of all trades, mistress of none. I tried a little bit of everything until I found something that really I found very satisfying and gratifying. I get the opportunity to really help people and really help small to medium-sized businesses just become more efficient and have good controls around their books and stuff. So, it allowed me to have that passion of taking care of people.
Yeah, that's what it largely comes down to. And no matter how much technology we infuse into the accounting profession, it's certainly becoming more and more tech focused. It's still largely about taking great care of clients, anticipating needs and service. Exactly.
So in January of 2015, the regional accounting firm that I was working for was acquired by BDO. And I can't tell you how fortunate I was. I was asked to take a leadership role as the firm knew we wanted to go heavily and strong into the outsourcing world. We were doing it in different parts of BDO, but they wanted to bring it all together and centralize it. They asked Kelly Johnson to lead the practice. She had been with BDO for some time, and she had the largest outsourcing practice. They asked me to take a leadership position and manage the technology for our outsourcing practice. So extremely, extremely fortunate that I was asked to take on that position. And it's just been a really incredible ride. I always tell Kelly it's like a magic carpet ride because we went from really being very dispersed to a very standardized process of rolling out BDO Drive, and we still have a lot more to do, and it's exciting every day.
Yeah, that's great background to understand how you got where you are and all the different chapters of your career that have built up to where you are. I'm sure there's a lot of people that are going to watch this that are in the earlier stages of their career that'll be inspired by that as well. Yeah,
it's great. And I don't know when I'll retire. I tell my husband I'm going to work indefinitely because I love what I do.
That's great. Every day doesn't feel like work then.
That's right. I don't even know what day of the week it is right now, so.
Yeah.
With working remotely, they just all kind of blend together.
Yeah, no, that makes total sense. So I wanted to shift gears and talk a little bit about QuickBooks Online. And I know you work with a lot of clients and help to set the standards for how BDO USA uses QuickBooks Online in its outsourced practice. What would you say is your favorite tip that you'd give to somebody on your team or a client that's new to using QuickBooks Online, that's a complete beginner?
I think some of the tips and tricks that are out there, I love the fact that QBO has a calculator embedded into the amount field. So if you have to add up information, numbers for a particular bill, you can actually use it as a calculator. I find that extremely useful, just efficiency tips. But when it comes to reporting, one of my second, and I don't like to say first and second, but another one of my favorite tips is using the keyboard shortcuts. So like at the beginning of on your report, if you hit the letter M, it'll take you to the first day of the month. If you hit the letter H, it takes you to the last day of the month. So, it's those types of just keyboard shortcuts and using the tool can really help a beginner develop themselves with using QuickBooks Online. And I'll tell you, a third thing that really helps clients a lot is the fact that they always say, well, I'm stuck. I have one browser window, and I have to keep going back to open up reports over and over again. But if you use QBO in Chrome and you go up to your tabs key, you can duplicate those tabs all the way across and have multiple windows open at the same time. So that defies the odds of, I only have one browser and I hate using the back button.
Yeah, it's an interesting trick for Chrome. I find myself using that across a lot of apps, especially with G Suite. And when I heard you mention the keyboard shortcuts, it brought flashbacks to early days of Lotus 1-2-3 and the old slash RNC, and it would have been the early pre-Windows, right? Like early 90s.
Now you're really dating us. Thanks.
Yeah, it's funny how much keyboard shortcuts are still very
huge.
Yeah, we're talking about AI and machine learning, and yeah, the keyboard still is super relevant. So if you think about the other end of the spectrum, the power user, I know you go to a lot of conferences, speak at a lot of conferences. When you run into people that have been using QuickBooks for decades, and maybe it's at a reception or something, and they're picking your brains about some of the things you figured out with QuickBooks Online that are relatively unique and unusual, and you're trying to one-up each other for the coolest power user tip you have. What's a piece of advice you'd offer to someone that has been using QuickBooks Online for years?
Yeah, so one of the biggest things is setting up the bank feeds. I see so many QuickBooks Online accounts that never ever set up their bank feeds, and it streamlines the process so much when you go to your month-end reconciliation. So that's critical to really getting the best efficiencies within your monthly close, is having that bank feed coming in. The other thing is setting up rules within that bank feed, and understanding how those rules work. Because they can be an adversary if you're not setting them up properly. And then the third one I would say is setting up reoccurring transactions. If you have items that consistently occur every single month, you should be leveraging that reoccurring transactions for sure. It can automatically post for you into your general ledger. So I'd say those are three of the things that really come to mind, especially when I'll sit down with a client that's been using QuickBooks Online for 4 years, and they've never done any of those things. And I'll get a phone call, and they'll be like, "Oh my gosh, how come I didn't know this 4 years ago?"
So it's recurring transactions, which in a kind of a subscription-based economy has got to be something that's huge. Rules, and especially rules that tie into the bank feed. Does this kind of impact how you do onboarding of new clients, or these things that you try to discover early on, or are they usually added incrementally over time when someone's spotting trends?
So definitely connecting the bank right up front. It's one of the processes that we do right out of the starting gate. Understanding the patterns and letting the client use the system for a set period of time before turning all these bells and whistles on. I believe it helps them to learn exactly how the system operates. So we like to call it, crawl, walk, run. So get them used to it, get them comfortable with it. They get on their feet, they're pretty steady, and then we just start adding in all the efficiencies.
Yeah, it sounds like a great plan, and it looks pretty universally applicable, whether you're talking to a client or somebody that's on your team that's doing outsourced accounting.
Yep, absolutely. Absolutely.
So we talked about what's super important for beginners to QuickBooks Online, what someone that's been using QuickBooks Online for years may not realize that could drive a lot more efficiencies, especially around rules and bank feeds and recurring transactions. What do you see across the board as the biggest mistake, or the top mistakes that people are making when they're using QuickBooks Online?
There's two that come to mind right off the top of my head. People don't understand what undeposited funds are. You have to really walk them through that concept. I've seen undeposited funds build up over a period of time, and deposits get duplicated and income get duplicated because they don't understand how it actually works. So I think that's important to understand. How undeposited funds actually works. And then the other piece of it is that I see mistakes made is switching from accrual to cash, pushing a button inside your reports when you go over to cash basis and you see these two things called unapplied cash or payments or unapplied cash expenses, they get terribly confused as to how those got there and what the purpose of them is. So I think it behooves people to take time and go through and understand exactly how all those components actually work within QuickBooks Online.
So it's a combination of the funds are not applied properly. They're just not. It's kind of unreconciled.
So let me explain. So what happens when you do accounts receivable, right? You have put all your invoices in, and clients will send you a payment. Well, you could get a stack of 5 checks one day, right? So you go in, you make a deposit, but you know that you're taking all 5 checks to the bank at the same time. Well, you don't want to make a deposit and see 5 checks listed in your bank reconciliation, because then when you look at your bank statement, it'll say $10,000 for these 5 checks, but in your bank reconciliation it says, $2,000 5 times in a row. So what you want to do is you want to go in and make a deposit to undeposited funds. It's like a drawer. And then you can go in and make a bank deposit and group those deposits together. So what I typically see happen is that drawer keeps growing because people keep making deposits into the undeposited funds, but they never go and make the bank deposit, and then they go and receive the payments, and it goes, actually to the bank account rather than undeposited funds. So they just don't leverage it the way that it was designed to. So I've seen that happen a lot, and it's a lot to clean up.
Does that make sense? Is it something that shows up at month end when you go to reconcile, or it's just something that would get buried and you'd never catch?
No, you catch it when you look at the balance sheet, but many clients don't look at the balance sheet. They're only interested in their profit and loss. And so they go to do their bank reconciliation and they see all the deposits that they made, so they reconcile their bank. But if they would go back and look at the balance sheet, you'd see a big number sitting in undeposited funds, and then you would know something was wrong.
That's mistake number 3, caring about the P&L.
That's typical, though.
Not about the debits and credits.
It's not about the balance sheet to them. Yeah, it's not about the balance sheet. It's always about their they want to compare what their profit is and what their cash is. So how am I doing this month compared to last month or the previous year, doing P&L comparisons, and how much cash do I have in the bank? That's always top of mind for clients.
Mindset, yeah. And that's why they need more than ever their trusted advisor, their accountant, to help them see a more complete picture. Exactly.
So that's absolutely important. And again, even just the accrual to cash, I've seen where accountants don't understand what happens when they push the button and you get a negative on the balance sheet, and they'll post a journal entry to retained earnings because they don't understand how it works. So it's those types of things. It's just understanding what the button means when you push it and what can happen when you see those things appear, because they're default accounts within the system.
You think that's a byproduct of a lot of people using QuickBooks Online that never had accounting one? I had a grand total of 9 credits of undergraduate in accounting and a little bit in grad school, but not understanding the difference between cash and accrual. I don't think it's that. I mean, it could be a little bit of that. It's more what that button does when you push it, right? It's the functionality of the system. If you compare desktop to online, QuickBooks Desktop doesn't take it over to the profit and loss. It leaves it on the balance sheet if it's a negative. But with QuickBooks Online, Intuit designed it so it will remove it off of the balance sheet and it moves it to the profit and loss because they have the negative balance in their accounts receivable, so the system thinks that should be showing up as income. Or you have a negative balance in accounts payable as a credit, and it really is a credit, but the system takes it over as an expense to your P&L. So it's understanding, why it's doing what it's doing to make it justified. Yep, that makes total sense. The last question I want to touch on today is, you're fortunate that you're in a big enough firm that you probably get to spend a fair amount of time thinking about big picture strategy. And smaller CPA firms, they probably don't get as much time to think about it. But if you think like in a tech company, there's product managers, and the job of the product manager is to talk to users all the time and figure out what they can do to help solve problems, anticipate needs, creating new products and services categories. When you think about where your outsourced practice is going, when you think about where the industry as a whole is going, are there certain features that are in QuickBooks Online that are kind of roadmap thinking ahead? What do you see as the big opportunity for outsourced accounting thinking ahead the next 3 to 5 years? What's going to be most important to your clients, and where should you be anticipating?
Well, I will tell you, first and foremost, especially during the pandemic right now, having the ability to have a remote workforce was critical for many, many of our businesses. And having QuickBooks Online allows you to work collaboratively with your clients, right? You can be in there simultaneously. You can be doing a screen share. It makes all the difference in the world when you can stay close and in touch with your clients. And if you are have a desktop application, in a desktop installation, you don't have that luxury of just being able to go out to the internet and do a collaborative effort and look at something when the client says, hey, something doesn't look right. Can we take a look at it together? Can we talk about it? That is probably first and foremost on my mind. I think that it's a huge advantage, a big opportunity to be working with your clients to move them to QuickBooks Online. The other thing is Intuit has provided a wholesale billing platform for accountants, for accounting firms, and whether you pass along the direct cost of the product to your clients or you mark it up, it's an easier transition. We have fantastic processes in place that leveraging that wholesale platform and QuickBooks Online Accountant gives us the ability to provision and deprovision our users. Unfortunately, people leave BDO, and I have to be able to remove them from client access. And by having a QBO platform that houses all of our QuickBooks Online files, we have, really been able to manage our processes.
That sounds like a combination of realizing that whatever inherent trade-offs someone had that was keeping them on QuickBooks Desktop, keeping them on the enterprise side, that a lot of those have become moot point and negated now that everyone's been working remote, and probably will be for the foreseeable future.
Yeah, and we live and learn, right? So, and practice makes perfect. I've had a lot of clients that'll say, oh, I tried QuickBooks Online, and I didn't like it. And my analogy to that is, we all had to learn how to ride a bike, or most of us did, and you fell off, right? And it wasn't a pleasant experience, but we get back on and we try it again because things change. The tires on the bike get wider, you get a little bit taller. It's all those types of things that, if people take a step back and just, try it again, I think that's a great approach to leveraging the product.
Sounds like the wholesale billing opportunity is a good one too, as well, for accounting firms that are already doing back office services for their clients.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah. And you can draw revenue from it.
Yeah.
If you decide you want to mark it up.
Rather than just telling them they have a cash problem, you can actually help them with their cash problem.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. So that's my thoughts on it.
Thoughts on where the industry is headed. Yeah, this has been super insightful. I really appreciate you taking the time to speak with me today about your favorite tips around QuickBooks Online. Deborah, where's the best place for people to learn more about what you do at BDO USA, learn more about you, connect with, follow with you? Where would you recommend they look you up?
So obviously my Twitter handle at Deborah Duffer, aka Dr. QuickBooks. They can follow me. On LinkedIn, I'm on LinkedIn, Deborah Duffer, and then they can go out to our BDO Drive, www.bdo.us, bdodrives.com website to see our services as well.
Excellent. Well, again, thank you so much. This has been a wealth of information, and I know that our viewers, our listeners, our readers that are looking at these tips will get a tremendous amount of value, regardless of whether they're new to QuickBooks Online, whether they've been on the platform for years, knowing mistakes to prevent, and thinking about the overall business opportunity and what their firm should be looking to do in the next few years. So again, it's super helpful.
Yeah, thanks. It was nice chatting.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the AI in Accounting podcast. To subscribe and leave a review, check us out at blog.vic.ai or wherever you like to consume podcast episodes, including Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and YouTube.